Good afternoon, everyone. It's a lot of people here, and what I heard is okay. Here is better. What I heard is that this is the new Silicon Valley of Brazil, and so I'm really excited to be here. And in many cases, I would say the one thing that I like the most is speak with entrepreneurs, and this is an opportunity for me to share with them some of the experience that I had building Waze and some of the experience that I had building. I think that when I'm getting close, no, this is too noisy. And sharing the experience of building startups, and to a certain extent, the reason that I do that is I think that the future is yours, right? So we are here to change the world, and this is the opportunity that we have. And the more entrepreneurs we have, the more likely that we will make the world a better place. And we are the one that can make the impact. And so I will be speaking this afternoon about disruption and about startups and about entrepreneurship and the passion for change. And by the way, this is my email somewhere. Well, I think that on those screens you can see. And I do answer all of my emails. Right? So I travel a lot, and I have plenty of time in the airplane to read emails and answer them. Not necessarily the answers that you would like, but I answer all of them. So I want you to think about entrepreneurship for a second. And it's usually start with a very strong emotion, right? So you run into something that you hate, like traffic jams, right? And you tell yourself, wait a minute, I'm going to change that. And you start to build your dream and the passion until you feel pretty confident that this is what you want to do. And then you realize that the journey itself is a roller coaster journey, right? There are ups and downs and ups and downs. And if you ask any business person, everyone will tell you, okay, all the businesses in the world have ups and downs. But the frequency of those in a startup are much higher, right? So it could be a few times a day, right? One of the best venture capitals in the US, Andreessen Horowitz, Ben Horowitz used to be a CEO of a startup, and he was asked whether or not he was sleeping well at night as a CEO of a startup. And he said, oh yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried, right? And the reality is that there are days that you go home crying and you basically say, it doesn't work. Why in heaven did I went into this journey? And that could change a few times a day. And at the same time, for entrepreneurs, there is no doubt what's next. It's always the next startup. In many cases, if you would ask an entrepreneur, okay, so this startup of yours, very interesting, what are you going to do after that? They will tell you, I'm going to build another one. Right? And then you would ask them, this next startup of yours, what it's all about? They actually know. And so we started Waze in 2007. We launched the product 2009. By that time, I knew that my next startup is going to deal with financial fees. I only built that in 2013, and by the time I built that, I knew that there is already a pipeline of startups that I would like to build, a pipeline of problems that I think worthwhile of solving. So going into this journey of building a startup, this is exactly like falling in love. Right? So there are many ideas that you think of, and eventually there is this one idea that you tell yourself, this is the one idea that I'm going to work on. Right? You go to many dates, and eventually there is one that you tell yourself, she is the one. Right? Now at the beginning, you only want to spend time with your date. You don't care about the rest of the world. Right? You start thinking about your new concept from multiple perspectives. Right? So this is the problem I'm going to solve. These are the users. This is how I'm going to build the solution. This is how I'm going to build my team, and so forth, until you feel confident enough. And then you tell your friends, this is what I'm going to build. Right? And usually the first reaction is, this will never work. Right? And by the way, this is the good flavor of it, because I've heard, this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard. Right? And this is about Waze. Right? You take your date for the first time to meet your friends and they're saying, she's not for you. This is where you disengage from your friends. So the good news is that you are in love and you don't listen to anyone else. The bad news is that you are in love and you don't listen to anyone else, right? But you actually do need to be in love with the idea that you're going to build, because otherwise the journey is so complex, so hard, so frustrating, that very likely that you will give up. And the journey is very long, and the longest part of the journey is the one that says lack of traction. This is where you try everything and nothing works, right? So you build a product and it doesn't work. You build a product and the product does work and the users are not coming. You build the products and it does work and the users are coming, but they're not staying, right? And so every part of it is like crossing a desert, right? There's only sand around you and you're making baby step progress and you don't even see that you're making this progress. Imagine yourself in the desert, right? There's only sand around you and you go to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and there's still only sand around you. This is it. Now, all the startups in the world have this lack of traction phase before they figure out product market fit. Now, the journey itself is a journey of failures. Now, this is very, very important to understand. If you would know that, then the most important thing becomes to make those failures fast. Because this is your opportunity to simply have more tries, right? So if you'll come to me and say, this is my roadmap, right? Here is a list of 17 different features. What I will tell you, okay, here is a list of 17 different experiments that you're going to do. Because once you find one that does work, this is the last one. Now, the important part of journey of failures is that if you're afraid to fail, then in reality, you already failed because you're not going to try. Organizations that actually shut down tries, or basically, instead of encouraging people for making tries, they are discouraging them, very unlikely to figure out the right way. Now, the reality is that we are trying to build something new that no one did before, right? And so even though that we are 100% sure that we know exactly what we are doing, the reality is that we don't know. And so we try. We try one thing, it doesn't work. We try another thing, it doesn't work. We keep on trying different things until we find one thing that does work. And that buys us a ticket for the next part of the journey, right? So initially, it's always about product market fit. But later on, maybe it's about growth, maybe it's about business model different, maybe it's about scalability, maybe it's about globalization. Each one of them is different journey. Each one of them is a journey of failures. The other side of journey of failures is that we're going to celebrate a lot of things, right? So you look again at your budget and you should, the vast majority of the budget is going to be spent on people and then marketing and operation. But we need to have budget for caipirinhas, right? Because we need to celebrate a lot of things, right? And so the first user, the first version, the first office, the first time that someone writes us on the paper is actually pretty good. Much better than that, if someone is suing you for patent infringements. We have seen in the previous presentation, right? If someone is copying you, that's actually a good reason for celebration. You should be worried if no one wants to copy you, because then you don't make an impact, right? If someone is suing you for patent infringements, that means that someone cares. That means that someone thinks that what you're doing is actually pretty significant. Now, the best part is when people actually come to you and say, thank you for what you have done for you. Then you know that we fulfill our destiny as entrepreneurs and making an impact. The first phase of all the startups is the most critical one. And in this phase, two major things happen, right? So we start with understanding this is the problem we're going to solve, right? But the two major things is, number one, you establish the DNA of the company that you are building. And it's up to you to decide. You can dream about the working place and define it this way, I'm going to build it. And you will be successful in doing that if you can define it at the beginning. If you don't define it, then the result will be something that maybe you don't even like. So when we started Waze, we said Waze is going to be for us the best working place we ever had. And we defined what does it mean, what kind of people we would like to hire, what are the processes, what is important for us, what is not important for us. And we built it in such a way. The other thing that is critical that happens on the first phase is product market fit. Now think about, take a look at your smartphone, the first page, right? So all the applications that you're using on a regular basis. So maybe Google is there, and Waze is WhatsApp, Netflix, so forth. And ask yourself, what is the difference between each and every one of those applications that you are using today and the first time that you have used that? And the answer is that there is no difference, because they figure out the product market fit back then and they don't change it, right? This is the value proposition, it works, don't change it. Now, what happened before they were here, the journey up to figure out product market fit, we don't know that. It was a long journey for all of them, right? So just imagine if you are using Netflix, raise your hand, right? So quite a lot of people here, right? Netflix, the way that we know it, started in 2008. But Netflix as a company started in 1998. 10 years before that, they were trying to figure out this product market fit. And only once they figured it out, it became so popular. So the graveyard of startups is full with companies that did not figure out product market fit. The journey to figure out product market fit is the most critical one, because if you figure out product market fit, you will be successful. Depending how big the market will actually define how big the success is, but you will be successful. So for me, a startup journey, I can abstract that in a very simple way, right? Start with a problem, a big problem, something that it's worth solving, something that the world will become a better place if you address that. And then ask yourself, so who has this problem, right? Now, if you happen to be the only person on the planet with this problem, then I would recommend to go to a shrink. It's going to be much cheaper than building a startup. But if a lot of people actually have this problem, then what you should be doing next is go and speak with those people and understand their perception of the problem. Because otherwise you might be building something that no one cares. Now, once you understand the perception of the problem of other people, this is the right time to go and build a solution for it. Now, this is critical. Product guys and girls, raise your hand for a second, right? So quite a lot of us. Here is the challenge for product people. We always think the user in our own perspective. So we take ourselves as the example for the users. And we are amazing example of one person. This is it, right? We are not even aware that there are other people that are not like us, that they are using products differently, that they have other challenges, right? And so in order to understand product development, you need to speak with users that are not like you. And when you do that, you're actually making much faster progress in building your product. So some of the most critical tips that I have, and you know, at the end of the day, if there is one slide that you're going to remember, this is the one, right? So who are the users and what is their perception of the problem? The second that you forget that, you start building things that no one cares. Now, don't trust your own instincts. Ask people, ask users, gather feedback all the time, measure behavior, and always bring them into the office to ask them one question that no data can provide you. Why? This is the only question that you actually need to ask people. So why did you not use this feature, right? And you will hear different answers, right? Some of them, I didn't even know that it's there. And some of them will say, oh, this is not valuable for me, or I don't care about this one, or it's too complex, right? So we will hear different things when we ask why. Make your mistakes fast. You know, for me, product development starts after you launch. because this is where you're going to learn faster. This is where you have real users and real feedback, and you are not in the lab cycling around yourself and making no progress. The DNA and the mission define the journey, right? So if you are going to make the world a better place and you have built the right team, the journey is going to be worth taking. Even if you'll fail, you'll go back to the beginning and you'll tell yourself, you know what? If I could start all over again, I would. Because the mission was right and the team was right. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Wherever you are focusing on the problem. Look, the difference is very simple, right? If you would ask an entrepreneur what you are doing, if the answer is our company or our product doing this, this, and this, you focus on the solution. If the answer is the value that we create for you or what we are doing for you is X, Y, and Z, then you focus on the problem. Now look at your stories, right? So just imagine that you will send me one paragraph about what you are doing. If you don't start with the problem, you're not going to become a market leader. Market leader thinks problem first. They will claim ownership of the problem and become market leaders. Now focus, we at the beginning when we started Waze, then everyone told us, okay, this will never work, right? Now, after a little while that we have demonstrated a little bit of traction, then people start telling me, you can take Waze for taxi drivers. You can take that for truck drivers. You can take that for horse riders. You can take that for bicycle riders. And we basically say, I don't care about anything else. What we care about is help drivers in their daily commute to shorten the time. And we remain focused on that mission by saying absolutely no to everything else. And so focus is not about what we are doing, it's about what we are not doing. These are the hard decisions, saying no. Now the last one is very interesting. I happen to speak with a lot of entrepreneurs that their last startup failed. And ask them why, right? And about half of them say the team was not right. Now the reality is that this answer is incorrect. The right answer is that we did not figure out product market fit. But in their perception, half of them said the team was not right. So I kept on asking, okay, what do you mean the team is not right? And so some of them said, okay, we had this guy not good enough, this guy not good enough. So not good enough was one reason. And then there was another reason that people told me we had communication issues, right? So something that I actually called ego management issues, right? And so these were the two main reasons. And then I asked them, when did you know that the team is not right? And all of them knew within the first month. All of them knew within the first month that the team is not right. There was one guy that told me before we even started. And so the problem was not that the team was not right. The problem was that the CEO did not make hard decisions. Making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard. This is why no one likes to make them. And in most of the organization, they will go all the way to the top. Now just imagine that in your engineering team, that there are 10 engineers and there is someone that is not right, doesn't fit. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't fit because he's way underperforming or it doesn't fit because he's a jerk. It doesn't matter, right? Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that, right? So everyone knows that and the CEO doesn't do anything. There are only two options. Number one, CEO doesn't know, which means that CEO is stupid. This is not good. Number two, CEO does know and still doesn't do anything. That's actually even worse. CEO lacks the leadership to make hard decisions. The result, by the way, is always the same. The top performing people would leave. They would leave because they have a choice. Fundraising. So who thinks that their startup is going to raise capital? Raise your hand. So the rest think that they are already set up with no funding. Okay, this is pretty amazing. But here is the reality, right? So a couple of years ago, I met with one of the leading VCs in Israel, and I asked the general manager, how long does it take you to decide if you like the entrepreneur or not? So we were sitting in a small meeting room, and the guy is looking at me, looking at the door, looking at me again, looking at the door again, and says, before they sit down. Seconds. That's how long it takes us to set the first impression, right? Now, if you don't think so, then think Tinder, right? How long does it take you in Tinder to decide if you like or not like or dislike, right? Now, if this is seconds to establish the first impressions and few minutes to let it sink or change it, then you have to start with the strongest point at the beginning. Whatever it is, start with the strongest point at the beginning. Because maybe by the time you'll get there, it's irrelevant anymore. So the overall presentation that you should have is very, very short, very simple, right? The rest is discussion. Now, you don't even need a presentation to do that. You start with the strongest point at the beginning. You have to remember that investors are also users, right? If they don't think that they are going to use that, or they cannot think of someone that they know is going to use that, they are not going to invest. Learn how to tell a good story. Story is not about facts. It's about emotional engagement. Now, this is why you need to start with the problem, right? Very easy to get emotionally engaged with a problem, much harder to do that with the solutions that you don't know. So if you'll go to someone and they'll say, you know, this problem of yours, I'm going to take that away. This is already interesting. If you'll start to explain this is what I'm building, then maybe no one cares. If you are going to venture capitals, they care only about big market. If it's small market, it's not for them. It may be for other investors, but not for them. And then you finish up with the strongest point at the end. And in many cases, this is about 2 minutes story. This is it. Now, if you don't know how to tell a good story, then learn. You can simply learn how to tell good stories. So the Waze story, and this is a very unique story. If you are using Waze, raise your hand. So this is, it's pretty much everyone, right? If you are too young to use Waze and you are using Move It, raise your hand, right? So not a lot of people here, many more in other cities. But the Waze story, if I would have a time machine, and we will go back in 2007, and I will tell you this is my vision, you will not believe me. You will say this will never work, and if you are a little bit more blunt, then you will tell me this is the stupidest idea that we ever heard. The magic of Waze is that we, the drivers, create everything that is being used by the application. So not only traffic information and speed traps, also the map itself. So when we started, that was the map of Tel Aviv. Blank page. There was absolutely nothing on the map. Now, when the first driver drove, we collected the GPS data from the device, and if we take this GPS data and draw that on the blank page, this is what we're going to get. Now, if we start to take that from a lot of drivers, we are starting to get something that looks like a map. Right? If I will tell you that this is a traffic circle in the middle, it is a traffic circle. It looks like a traffic circle, and it is. If I would ask you, can you tell the difference between a main road and a street? You can see the density and tell me, okay, this is main road and this is street, right? If there is an intersection that no one is making left turn, then no left turn is allowed, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and only 2 coming the other direction, this is one-way street in Tel Aviv. And later on, by the way, when we deploy that in other places, we figure out that the 2% threshold is not enough. Now, if you are a software engineer, raise your hand for a second. So for us, if I can describe something, we can build it. As simple as that, right? And I just described how to take this data and build a map out of it. And this is exactly what we did. So we built a server that gathers all the information, generates the map, And then we enabled map editing tools that people can provide us with street names and house numbers and points of interest to make the map fairly complete. Now at this phase, if we will have someone that is driving slow, then we can figure out that there is a traffic jam here. And if we have a lot of drivers all over, then we can figure out where all traffic jams are and actually route people to avoid the traffic jams. So the magic of Waze is that we, the drivers, crowdsource everything so it can be used by other drivers. Now, if that really works, let's see this video. So what we are seeing in this video is how the map was created in a few places in Eastern Europe. And you can see the date, beginning of 2010, and it took about 6 months for the map to become good enough. Now this is critical. Good enough wins the market. The biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. You don't need to build perfect product. It will become perfect over time. But the good enough is going to win the market. Now, in particular, if this is good enough and free, then there is no one that can compete with that. Now, the story itself, we started in 2007. The first version of Waze was running on a PDA. I see that people don't even know what a PDA is. Long time ago, they were dinosaurs, and after that we had PDAs, and then we had Nokia phones, and today we all have Android and iPhones, right? This long time ago is 10 years, right? Then you ask yourself, wait a minute, if this what happened in the last 10 years, what's going to bring us the next 10 years, right? If we will have this conference here 10 years from now, and I will meet you again, I will need to remind you that we used to have iPhones and Android and things like that. They will disappear. They disappear so fast that the pace of changes is so dramatic that if you will need to go back 10 years, no iPhone, no WhatsApp, no Waze, no Netflix, Gmail, beginning of Gmail, yeah, so forth, you will not survive. Once we adopt something new, we cannot even remember what it used to be. This is how fast technology is changing in the world. I'm going to skip that because of time constraints. There is something else that I want to tell you, and this is about disruption. So a lot of time I hear the terms, okay, this is disruptive technology, right? Technology by itself means absolutely nothing. Disruption is when we change behavior. Is when we change the market equilibrium, when people are starting to do things differently. Usually, it's not because of a new technology. It could be a new product, which could be a derivative of a new technology. It could be a new price. If you are using Gmail, raise your hand. Okay, this is everyone, right? Now, Gmail is exactly 15 years old. Before that, you don't know, because I look at some of the faces here that seems to be too young to know. Before that, we used to pay to have a mailbox. So if you wanted to have an email, you used to pay to the internet service providers additional 10 reals a month or whatever to have an email. And then Google came out with the free Gmail. It was good enough and free, and this is it. Everyone else that was building email servers for service providers died. So when you change the price, you make dramatic changes. Maybe you change the business model. Maybe you create new knowledge that is not available beforehand. So imagine Uber, and you ask yourself, what is the disruption of Uber? Well, it's definitely not technology. It's actually new knowledge. The marketplace created the ability of drivers to know where the passengers are. Without that, there is no Uber. Now, the reality is that Brazil is the second largest market for Uber. São Paulo is the largest city for Uber in terms of number of rides. Now, disruptors are always newcomers. They are the ones that have nothing to lose. Existing businesses are not going to disrupt their own market. They're not going to disrupt their own market mainly because what they have to lose is within the organization. So in order to change, in order to disrupt, you need to start with the statement, whatever we are currently doing is wrong. Now, as a person, this is very hard things to say, right? Stand in front of the mirror, no one is watching you and say, I'm wrong, right? We don't say that to ourselves. Now, just imagine an organization telling themselves that they're wrong. Now, the newcomers is mainly you. This is the opportunity, right? This is the opportunity to basically say, we're going to change the way things are being done. And we're going to do that because maybe we build it in such a way that we can make it free. Maybe we actually create new knowledge that makes change the demand or the supply. Maybe we actually do have a new product that is not available in the market. And this is the needed product. Maybe we change the business model. I'll skip some of those. Very interesting is looking at the point of view of disrupted industries and market leaders of industries, right? So here's a story about Blockbuster and Netflix, right? And here's the CEO of Netflix going into the office of the CEO of Blockbuster and ask them to acquire them. Twice. And they say no. Now today you look at Netflix and obviously, you know, we looked at it earlier, everyone raised their hand. Blockbuster, there are still four branches of Blockbuster in Alaska. So essentially, they haven't seen it coming, right? Now, in fact, in their management meeting, what they said is that whatever they're building, we can do better. And the reality is that maybe they could have, but they didn't. When the iPhone started, Microsoft was actually in a pretty much leading position of building operating systems for phones, and there were Motorola's running a Windows mobile operating system, and Samsung, and many others. And they said, okay, this is not interesting. This is maybe a niche, no one cares, right? Now, the reality is that we know what happened late. Who invented the digital camera? Kodak did. In their labs, 1976, they built the first version of digital camera. And the R&D team called the CEO to show him what they just built, and he said, shh, don't tell anyone. If a revolution is due, you cannot prevent it. Now, the good news, by the way, the Google and Yahoo is even more interesting. We don't think of Google as someone that struggled, right? But at the beginning, they did. And they were unable to raise capital. And so they went to Yahoo, that at the time they were the search engine for Yahoo, and asked Yahoo to acquire them. And Yahoo asked them, okay, how much? And they said $2 million. And Yahoo said no. So you look at it today and you say, this is a big mistake. Wait a minute. We don't know what would have happened if they would have said yes, right? So assume that they would have said yes. What would have happened? Most likely nothing. So this is something that we need to remember. When we are making a decision, it is the right decision. So there are right decisions and no decisions. Because if you make a certain decision, you don't know what it would be like if you'll make a different one. Now, the other side of disruption is that disruption is good. The new market, by definition, is much bigger and better than the previous one. In many cases, when industry is looking at disruption as a threat, the right way to look at it is an opportunity because the new market is bigger. Now, the good news for us as entrepreneurs is that the industry don't see disruption as good. They see that as a challenge, as a risk, as a threat, and this is the opportunity for us. You know, take the car industry as a model, right? So no doubt that there is a lot of money invested in trying to build autonomous vehicle. And you start to ask yourself, wait a minute, let's assume for a second that there is autonomous vehicle, right? That I can click on the clicker here, and the car shows up, and I will tell that car, take me wherever, right? And they will take me there. And then I click on the clicker again, and the car disappears. Now, if this is the case, I don't need to own a car. I need to have a clicker. Maybe I would have a big clicker for big car and a red clicker for red car, but I don't need to own a car. So the industry is going to change its business model, and instead of buying cars, people will be buying a service, right? Maybe per trip, maybe per kilometer, maybe per hour, but the business model will be changed. If the business model changed and you don't adapt fast enough, you will die. If you're a car maker and you don't switch your business model from selling vehicles to selling per use, you will die. If you are selling car insurance and you don't switch your model from selling per car to sell per mile, you will die. If you have a driving school, you will die anyhow. Look, the next generation will not drive. The generation after that, if we will tell them that we used to drive cars ourselves, they will not believe us. When I was young, my dad once told me that he used to ride donkey to school, and I did not believe him. It doesn't sound right, right? But remember, 50 years ago, there was a driver for the elevator, and those disappeared. Many places, if you don't know how much you are paying, it's calling for disruptions, right? Because essentially, with the knowledge available, it's very easy to create this knowledge base and tell people, you know, you're paying too much. So whether or not this is financial fees or at the mechanic or airfare or for legal services or medical services, ever thought about comparing prices when you go to the dentist? So you don't know what you're paying for, right? You're in the dentist chair and you don't see anything, right? You don't even know if there is a problem. The only thing that you know that it hurts. So this is me. I'm building startups. This is what I do. And I focus on those that create a lot of value, solving problems, right? Doing good and doing well. And here are my startups. So some of them you might know, Waze, Move It. Some of them, maybe Engie as well. Engie is actually pretty successful here in Brazil. Engie deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. If I take my car to the mechanic, whatever they'll say, I'll say okay. Right? If they will tell me, okay, you need to replace the carburetor in your car, then I will say, okay, go ahead and replace that, right? There's only one problem with that. There is no carburetor in my car. They don't build cars with carburetors 2 decades now. But we don't know anything at the mechanic, and we feel helpless. And when we feel helpless, we don't like those situations. So Engie is an app running on the smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, telling you what's wrong, and then asking mechanic around you to quote to repair that. But this is just the beginning. This is just how it looks for consumers. But imagine what value does it create for brands, for distributors, for mechanics, and so forth. Fairfly deals with the biggest secret in the travel industry. What happened to airfare after you book your flight? Now, you don't know because no one is comparing prices after they make the reservation. But airfare is going up and down all the time. It's going up and down based on the demand for a particular flight, right? So let's say that this is the price that you paid, and this is cancellation fees. If the price is here, then you actually did a good deal. If the price is here, you can actually rebook the same flight at a cheaper price. And so this is exactly what Fairfly is doing. Monitor your own itinerary, mainly for corporations, and actually save them quite a lot of money. FeeX deals with the biggest secret in the world, financial fees. In the US alone, there are $700 billion of financial fees. $700 billion. This is about 25% of the GDP of Brazil. Right? So a medium-sized country's GDP, and the scary part is that people don't know that they are paying them. When I was young, my dad once told me that if you don't know how much you are paying, then you're paying too much. And this is exactly the case. And so we built a platform that creates transparency. And surprisingly enough, using crowdsource to gather all the information. And we use that initially for consumers, but then later on figure out that transparency is actually good for the market. So it's being used by financial institutions and financial advisors. And the main thing here is that you create a platform that all of a sudden become critical for the market. Refundit deals with the frustrations of trying to obtain VAT when you travel to countries that actually give you VAT for tourists. So just imagine that you go to Europe and you buy stuff. On the way back, you're actually entitled to get the tax refund, the VAT back. When you try to do that, you will see that it simply doesn't work, right? There's always bad stories around that. Long lines at the custom. You get there and you ask, okay, do we have tax refund? And they say, of course we have. This is in a different terminal. Or something bad happened. The stores don't have the right forms. And we are building that in an app that all you have to do is scan the receipt, scan the boarding pass, scan your passport, and get your money back, as simple as that. And simplify and digitalize the entire process for everyone. And there are many other startups. I think that some of them, C3 is actually very interesting in Brazil as well. C3 is addressing one of the biggest problems for agriculture or for farmers, that they don't know what's going on. So just imagine that you are a farmer and you have millions of trees, of whatever trees, right? You don't know what's going on. And so C3 is a platform that have drone-mounted sensors flying over plantations of trees and providing the farmer with exact information in each and every tree. And the result is that this is increasing the yield pretty significant, because you cannot improve if you don't measure. You cannot even manage if you don't measure. And this industry doesn't measure anything. So maybe one more story. With all the days at Waze and later, always people come to me with their stories. And by the way, one of the reasons that you want to launch as soon as possible is that you actually have authentic stories of users and not the one that you made up. Those that you made up, they are not authentic. Real users give you real stories. And so over the years, there were a lot of people that says, thank you for Waze, you saved me from nightmare traffic jams, or I owe you thousands of dollars in speeding tickets and so forth. One of the best stories was a few years ago. Someone came to me and said, thank you, you saved my marriage. And I said, what? I said, well, because of Waze, we don't argue anymore in the car, so you saved my marriage. So I ended up to be a marriage consultant. But I think that I owe the best story to my son. And I have 5 kids, and one of them is now 21 years old, and he really likes to drive. So a few years back, I asked him one day to drive me to the airport. And he said, my phone is broken, I can't. And I said, what do you mean you can't? Here's the car, here are the keys, drive me to the airport. He said, no, you don't understand, my phone is broken. I don't know how to get there. And so I was scratching my head for a second, and I said, you know what? I'm going to be in the car with you, and I'll tell you how to get there. And then he said, and how would I come back? We lose orientation, but not logic. Thank you.